Hi, everybody. Welcome, gentlemen. We were just having a really interesting and surprising conversation backstage about how, Jeremy, you just went on Reddit and you were looking for mentions of Walmart.
There's a lot.
What'd you find?
Actually, it's a great place, I think, where the community gets together, obviously, to our customers talking about our stores and changes they like and don't like, and then also employees talking about customers. There was one thread about the garden center. People like to use the garden center to kind of sneak out the back door, and actually, we have some new technology that just went into place. Mobile handheld checkout capabilities, essentially, and now the garden center folks can use that, and people were commenting on how it's now even faster to go out through the garden center. And all the garden center people saying, please don't take your 100-item basket to the garden center, right? Please. Anyway, those kind of fun things. 5 minutes on Reddit will get you a lot.
And you said there are some other subreddits?
Oh yeah, there's some great ones, including Tales from IT, which is kind of the similar version of all the fun things that happen to an IT professional on their job, above and beyond the using your CD-ROM as a coaster, or I think it's effectively the IT crowd, but in real life. And then there's the similar one, which is Tales from Retail, which covers things like, all the terrible things that a salesperson has to deal with when working a retail job 9 to 5.
Well, Reddit, you can find the good advice, and you can find the snarky comments.
That's what we're there for.
All the things. What I think is interesting is a few years ago, there was a book published. Well, wait a minute. First, I'm going to ask the audience to see who we have here. How many people do we have that are CTOs? And how many people play in some way in design?
A lot of designers.
Okay, good. So that relates to the question that I was starting to ask. A few years ago, there was a book published called The Rise of the DEO, which was talking about the design executive officer. And as I was preparing for this, I was sitting here going, and yet I'm sitting here talking to CTOs. Why are you the guys on stage, and how is a CTO now having a seat at the design table?
Well, I think for us, part of our redesign wasn't just a redesign, but also a rebuild. Our stack is about 8 years old at this point, and so any kind of redesign has to go along with kind of a refresh of the tools that we're using as well. In my case, I'm also Reddit's first employee, so I like to joke that any design that comes across that I don't like probably isn't going to be alienating to our core user base. And so I try very hard to make sure that we're set up for success, both from the user side, because Reddit is a place for criticizing Reddit. Whenever we do something wrong, the community is ready to basically tell us what we did wrong. And so we've made sure to try to communicate with them on their own terms and actually involve them in the beta discussion. And for the technology side, it's all about making sure that the tools we pick are modern, and also the aesthetic we pick is also kind of modern.
Yeah, I think that resonates as well. I think as part of an organization that really focuses on product and customer thinking, you really have to focus on customer, no matter whether you're the engineer, the designer, or the product manager. So as we built out our small dedicated teams inside Walmart and we went through the redesign, it was all about how do I get customer feedback and iterating, right? You're sitting with the customer, iterating a ton. And so the technology, the designer, the product manager, the business teams, all are sitting together with the customer in mind. And so, yes, we're using a new technology stack. We are using React and React Native to build our apps, and that comes into play, and actually getting a ton of productivity about reusing components across the platforms. At the same time, we want to make sure that we're iterating for the customer at every step, right?
Well, yeah, and it was interesting. When I asked you about that backstage, you said that you actually hired a user experience team for the first time?
Yeah, so one thing about Reddit is actually it's a very small company in terms of employees, and so we have about 300 employees right now. When we started the redesign, we were closer to 150 with about 70 engineers, and we were still building our design team. And so as part of the redesign, we decided that, hey, wouldn't it be great to actually have a dedicated user research team that can actually talk to users directly and interview them and basically hear about what their concerns are and what their problems are. And so it gave us an opportunity to actually talk to not just Reddit's core user base, which is actually relatively easy to talk to because they will talk directly to you whether you want them to or not. or talk to some of the new users who, the feedback basically went the full gauntlet of, what am I looking at, to why are you trying to kill Reddit, and like all the different spectrum in between, mostly in between, fortunately enough.
I'm glad. And so out of all of that user research that both of you did, what are some interesting tidbits that maybe the people in the audience could learn from either a user learning perspective or a design perspective?
Well, I think the most important thing, and I'm surprised at how many companies and teams go through redesigns that they actually don't sit with the customer. The greater part about Walmart, and we have a number of Walmart stores that we use as sort of test stores in Sunnyvale and Milpitas and Mountain View that are 3 totally different kind of stores, neighborhood markets, and we'll go in there and sit with the customers and talk to them about how they're using our apps. In our case, we're also building apps that our associates use, so we can walk through the store and do picking modules and that sort of thing. So number one, you must sit down and talk to actual customers. And we've had a very mature design team that have worked with bringing customers inside our buildings to do user research and the sort of our eye tracking modules and all the things that you expect. And it's really about making sure you're actually listening to it and not actually looking for the tidbits that you want. Having a strong design lead, as you were talking about, they're really trained to make sure that they're not sort of telling their story that they want to hear, and they're really listening to the customers. So that's probably the main thing. Go talk to your customers directly.
And I think in our case, a major important thing we did was actually do a very slow rollout of this redesign. And that was really just to give us an opportunity to hear from as many users as possible before we decided to go full bore and show it to everyone. So we really started our initial kind of very closed alpha nearly a full year ago, and kind of gradually started ramping up the number of users involved. And so it gave us an opportunity to kind of start off on a much more kind of friendly footing of users who actually were interested in seeing the redesign and who had a lot of interesting opinions that we could actually start involving in the redesign. And so it was this very fun game of balancing our vision for what Reddit could look like, and also to try and find out what do users actually want, what are users actually using, where does it fall flat, where does it work really well. And especially on Reddit, our goal as a platform is never to be dictatorial, but instead to kind of provide users with tools to do interesting things. And so it's always a game of generating a little change or a new product and just seeing where users really take it.
You're preaching to the choir here, because I ran the user experience group of various agencies for a while before running the agencies, and ethnography is the core of that. You have to understand how people think. I want to dig a little more specifically, what did you learn about what people want in terms of prioritization, in terms of the feature sets, in terms of the way that they want things to look and feel, specifically?
Well, I think in our case, one of the hard parts is we're competing with our own success. We had a product that has had some stability for a very long time, and so that was just the look that everyone expected from Reddit. So we're kind of fighting against ourselves. Now, the look that we were fighting against, though, has often been described as a dystopian Craigslist, I think is the one that's my favorite. And so, there's a lot of room for improvement there, and in a way that actually can, it's a serious comment to use. And so I think for specific complaints, it usually boils down to some very basic things like, there's a tendency on the modern web to have a lot more white space. Reddit is very, very dense. And so trying to find a nice balancing act between, not immediately having a new user come in and say, what am I looking at? What's all this text mean? And one of our more kind of core users actually being able to say, what's with all the white space? Why have you got so much room on this page? I want to see more things. That was a very fun discussion. We had a lot of great discussions around, honestly, performance. We went from moving to React. I'm sure you guys dealt with this as well. It's you're going from old-style server rendering, things load effectively instantly, or you can't tell how much of the load time is from the server responding versus just the normal internet slow response, to a situation where, the page loads instantly, and the content takes a very long time to kind of load because you're building it, or it's loading via a separate call. And so we got a chance to build a whole bunch of fun tooling around that.
In our case, those of you who haven't been on Walmart.com for a while, we passed 80 million products a little while ago, and you start getting into a situation where you have to essentially redesign to deal with things like personalization, localization, inspiration, right? As we're going through places like the home and the fashion area, you just don't want a list of, red dresses or red shoes. You want, a feel of the look. You might want to, figure out, this is my couch. Do I have side tables that work with this couch? So you're seeing a lot more machine learning and personalization capability in there to really predict what the customer wants. And yes, we've done a lot of great work on white space, and the design looks amazing. The other thing is, with working with our marketing team, is taking the product is always central, but using the product in its element. So it's not just a picture of the product, but it's actually, baby sitting in the baby carriage or the baby seat, actually using the products around there. You'll see that we've redesigned the entire site. We just launched it, I think 20% yesterday, so if you go on Walmart.com, you might not see it yet, but this next couple of weeks we'll roll it to 100%. And we're getting just incredibly good feedback, which obviously is great. When you make a major change to a website that hundreds of thousands of people go to every day, you're going to get feedback. And so far, the customers are loving it. One guy said it was dangerously enticing, right? So these are the kind of things we want to see, is like you coming on and really seeing a new set of curated products as you're dealing with hundreds, tens of millions of products on there. You need to make it easier to find.
There are so many questions rolled into that my mind is very excited right now. But one of them is, okay, so what is your KPI? How do you know you've been successful with this? Is it just qualitative feedback from people, or do you have some larger metric?
Yeah, there's a lot of metrics we're looking at. In the end, we talk about time to shop, and especially with groceries, it's really not uncommon to have an 80 to 100 item basket. And dealing with the ability for customers to shop in that environment, you don't want it to take 100 minutes to build your shopping basket. So back to my point about personalization and inspiration, it's how do I get a 50 to 100 item basket, sort of you're buying a lot of the same items week over week from Walmart that you've bought previously. Integrating in with your store and your store purchases, as well as online, allows you to build a 50 or 100 item basket really quickly. And then obviously sometimes you're there to buy something relatively unique, and then you want to add a half a dozen items while you're there. So it's really about speed, and we use the customer time. We're really about busy moms, busy families, and not only saving money, but saving time is the key metric that Walmart looks at.
I mean, in our case, we're actually trying to waste time. And in fact, waste as much time as physically possible. So, to some extent, like an easy metric we can use is things like time on site. So we're looking at kind of just rough user engagement. For the more core and engaged user base, that's not really that hard. I mean, we show them lots of content that's very interesting and engaging, and they just engage with it. And so a lot of our work has really been around the user experience, which is actually there's a whole swath of users who know about Reddit but don't really use Reddit. They're just kind of lurkers, or just kind of come in quick, get their content, leave. And for us, it's really about making an experience that can basically cover both. So we're basically just trying to build a platform that everyone loves. Which, how hard could that be?
We were trying to figure out backstage who had what role on stage. You're the straight man.
Okay.
Got it. And the whole thing is like, it's really interesting seeing what your different KPIs are, and it's also interesting to me. We got there. I was like, okay, Redesign has a whole lot more to do than, or it has to do with a lot more than just aesthetics, right? Like, you're really digging deeply into the user experience, and I know. Amazon got some criticism for, there was a whole Twitter thread about someone bought a toilet seat and then was like, I'm not trying to start a collection of toilet seats. Amazon doesn't seem to understand that I'm now not collecting toilet seats. So, that kind of understanding really, really matters. In what other ways are you applying it? You said personalization, localization. How does that show up? And does that show up on Reddit, too?
Yeah, personalization is really tricky, because when you look at buying patterns, it actually is funny. When people buy a TV, oftentimes if you go look at just the pure machine learning data, oftentimes they're still looking for another TV for one reason or another. They buy multiple TVs. But getting a recommendation for a pair of shoes right after you bought a pair of shoes seems like crazy, right? But and so we've had to build, and this is where the machine learning plus merchandising comes together, and this is really. When you look at what Mark Lurie and the merchandising team we got from Jet is, it's really how do I take the machine learning capabilities that we have and marry it with the best merchants in the world, right? And instead of just being lists and lists of items, you're really talking about, we always talk about people who are gluten-free or they're a dog lover or what sort of thing. Is what are those great products that are coming that marry with the products that you buy every day at Walmart, right? So that's the great part. We're seeing, thousands of new products coming on the website and to our stores every month. Our merchants know what's selling and they know what customers are going to like. And so how do you incorporate the sort of man-machine combo and doing that? And that's actually one of the fun parts of the job. Not just a pure machine learning problem.
Cool.
Yeah, and for us, actually, we had a chance to hire a full-time cartographer to keep track of Reddit's communities, because in our case, we have...
Wait, you said cartographer?
Cartographer. Her title is cartographer. It's actually a really cool title.
Awesome.
Because we have several million communities, and several tens of thousands of them are active in any given day. And so it's there's a lot of work that has to go into making sure we know the lay of the land ourselves. And so I think you can get really far by just throwing naive machine learning models at things, but you don't really gain any insight in the process of doing that. And so one of the things I try to encourage is that, hey, have you tried the really simple linear regression first on this, just to get some sort of baseline? Try to come up with explainable models first, and then throw the fancy solutions at them later once you kind of have some insights on what you're trying to achieve.
Absolutely.
And I think this is where the cartographer comes in. Her entire job is basically to get the lay of the land, start to do some broad categorization of communities, and give them some rough human-compatible labels, which just makes the inspection for the machine learning a lot easier.
That's marvelous. Does she make physical maps? Does she? I hope I walk into Reddit and see treasure maps. So
we will hopefully, by the time you walk in, have some nice maps of Reddit. Yeah. It's more of a I think for Reddit, it's not really so much a map of the world so much as a weather map, constantly changing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Really, really interesting.
I love seeing the design flows. I mean, the design team, along with the engineering, you really do have to look at it in flows, right? And maybe it's different on Reddit, but I think people are going to different communities and walking through the same kind of thing. Where you're in a shopping journey where you're out there. What do they talk? They're talking about males and females, hunters and gatherers, right? Are you going in there to hunt for a pair of socks? Are you there to look for a brand new chair for your living room? And really understanding what the capabilities are and what people are looking for. They might be shopping for a 100-item basket, or really spending an hour sort of trying to figure out what will fit in their space. So we have all those problems that you have to discover relatively early in the journey to make sure that it works. And localization can help a lot with that. Obviously, we've got such good, rich data with what's happening locally. You're talking about weather patterns at the least, but sports teams and other things that are happening with local that can really change the experience as you go on.
Say more about that. What does that mean?
Yes, take a localization. Say we've got a basketball game or something going on close by, and how are people preparing for the big game, and what are they bringing to the tailgate and that sort of thing. And you can really see that that is really a local market phenomenon and what people go shop for. So it's if you can detect that relatively early in the shopping experience, you can make it amazing.
Man, what I love about that is from my design research background, and we'll close it out here, the on and offline shopping experiences, how people actually live in the world as well as live online, both of those really matter in understanding a person holistically. And what I appreciate is that both of you have dug into who humans are in order to create what you've created. So thank you.
Thank you.
Cool.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody.